Welcome to Quilting on the Side, the podcast where we uncover the secrets to turning your passion for quilting into a profitable side hustle.
I'm Tori from the Quilt Patch by Tori.
And I'm Andi from True Blue Quilts. And together, we're your co-hosts on this exciting journey of creativity, entrepreneurship, and all things quilting.
We're here to help you navigate the world of quilt pattern design, course creation, digital marketing, and running an online quilt business. We've been through the ups and downs ourselves, so we know what it takes to make money from your favorite hobby.
That's right, Tori. We're going to share our experiences on how we've grown our businesses while balancing family with other paying work responsibilities. It's not always easy, but it's definitely possible. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Quilting on the Side. I'm excited to share our next guest story with you, but before we get into that, I want to let you know about our sponsor for this episode. We have been so thrilled using EQ8 for our quilt designs, and we think you'll love it too. I just think it's a great product for every quilt designer to start with. They've got some great benefits that make the design process really easy, but I'll tell you more about that later. Now, I want you to hear from Susan Smith of Stitched by Susan. Hello.
Hey, ladies. Thanks for inviting me on the podcast.
Of course. We're so thrilled to have you here. I met Susan last year at the Quilterpreneur retreat, and you may have heard her from our rapid fire questions there. She was so gracious to share her thoughts with me at that retreat. But now I want to get more of the full story. So dive in, Susan. How did you get started quilting?
Well, like probably many women, it is in my family history. I know that's not true for everyone, but it is certainly true for me. My family comes from old order Mennonite background. So I have literally hundreds of years, I don't know how long, of women making quilts in my backstory. And I do know that today I have 5 quilts made by 5 generations of women in my home, from my daughter and myself, my mother, my grandmother, my great-grandmother. So it's a thing that we've always done. And certainly I grew up quilting alongside my mom. I don't literally remember ever learning it. But what makes my story unique, I think, is that through quite a lot of my childhood, we lived in very northwestern Canada, and we were pioneers, quite honestly. We built the road to our land. We lived in a log cabin. We didn't have running water, and we certainly didn't have a power bar for a sewing machine. So I learned to sew on a treadle, and I learned to make quilts and clothing. So all the way through, well into my teenage years, that's how I sewed. And of course, we hand quilted the quilts too. My mom had the style of frame that's a big giant square in the living room, and you start at the edge and then you roll it up and it gets smaller and smaller as you quilt until you meet in the middle. So frequently our living room was full of a quilt, and we had to go under it when we wanted to go through the room.
What fun memories. Do you still have that treadle machine?
I do. It is in my sewing room as we speak. I still use it from time to time.
Awesome. What a neat skill to have. And when did you turn quilting into a business?
It was a kind of a multi-step process. My mom passed away when I was still in my 20s. And so raising our children, we had 4 and I homeschooled. That was, a full-time job and then some. So quilting and sewing in all its forms kind of took a back row seat for a number of years. But as the younger kids were going into high school and they did head off to public school then, I started getting back into it. So by that time, we were living in Washington State, where we still are. And I didn't know any other quilters then, like hand quilters particularly, right? So that was the first time that I started exploring the idea of machine quilting, literally so I could make quilts. I loved doing it. I loved piecing, and I wanted to make, more quilts faster, as many of us do. So the first ever class regarding quilting that I ever attended was one on quilting on a domestic machine. And I fell in love with it then and there. It was about a year later that a friend introduced me to her little long arm, and that's where I dove into long arm quilting. And pretty soon I was doing it for hire. Still, I would class it as a hobby. My husband he's an entrepreneur too, and so he had a business. I was the record keeper. So that was my day job, so to speak, and quilting was my little on the side, and it remained that way for a number of years. Really, it was the year that the pandemic struck that I kind of pivoted a corner. My husband lost his job. It just in a minute, as happened for so many people, it dried to a trickle and choices have to be made. And, I do not have a degree. And so to go out in a difficult time already and hunt for a job that was my choice, or make the hobby somehow pay. So I already had a certain amount of that funnel in place, in the sense that I quilted for hire. I knew how to invoice and, quilt intake and all that sort of thing, and price my work. So that was already in place. What made a real change, though, is I was at the point in my journey that I was ready to start teaching what I do. Of course, it's the pandemic, can't go on the road, to the quilting shows and teach any live and in-person classes. So I jumped right into creating digital courses at that point. So that's just over 4 years ago. And I would say that's when I really started getting serious about making my craft my business.
Yeah, that was a turning point for a lot of us, I think.
Wasn't it?
So your business now, is it still focused on long arming?
My business is still long arming for sure, but even the look of it has changed. So where for years I was in my niche, my favorite style of quilting, which is edge to edge, same design over the top of the whole quilt, this design that's right out of your head and free motion quilted, it just became, now I want to teach people how to do that. And so now a much larger portion of my business is developing and recording the courses, marketing the courses. So I still do the same type of quilting, but that has become a smaller portion, and delivering the courses has become the larger share.
And you teach both in person and online?
By far, the more of it is done online. So I travel in person maybe half a dozen times a year. I'll travel somewhere and teach in person. There still is nothing like getting to be together in the same room with quilters. I do still love that, and so do they. But definitely most of my energy now, at least for the next couple of years, goes into producing my courses.
And tell us a little bit about the logistics of that, in terms of what platform have you found as the best host for online courses? Everybody's interested in some of those nitty-gritty details.
Right. I can't really tell you I think this one is the best, because there are a number of them out there. A few of them are Teachable. Thinkific is one. Kajabi is another. And there are more. Honestly, I think they're apples and apples. I think pick one. And maybe if you're starting, pick one that has the best offers at the bottom end, like allows you to create 3 free ones, for example, and start with that. And then just invest in learning the one that you've chosen. I don't think one is massively better than another. The only difference to that might be, or the only other point of view on that might be, if you want an all-inclusive that, for example, will hold your email list as well, will produce, freebies and lead magnets as well, right? There are some that are more all-encompassing than others. I happen to use Thinkific. It is what I started with because they offer me the 3 free ones at the beginning, and it has served me really, really well. I've not been sorry. But I don't know any others super well because I've never dived deeply into them.
And I know some people get lost in the research, so that's very good advice to just pick one and get started. It may seem like a hassle along the way, but you can always change your mind. People change platforms
Can always
all the
change
time.
your mind. But I think it's true for a lot of the platforms. Like if you do have a particular platform for hosting your emails, or a particular platform for maybe even your cell phone service, right? There may come a time when there are other features that you need or want or need to get more advanced. But when you're beginning, just pick one and do it.
I totally agree. The only thing I might add is if you're able to explore the back end, pick one that feels natural to use or more natural than another. But you're right. I like the comparison of apples to apples because they're all so similar.
Mm-hmm. And you're right in that as well, Tori, in that some are more finished looking where they're kind of drag and drop, and others involve more, for the more knowledgeable, more tech savvy person, right? Might involve some coding or things like that. I personally gravitate towards the ones that are easy to use, but you're right. That is a great feature to be on the watch for.
And how are you marketing your courses? What have you found the most effective? I know a lot of people are like, oh, I can just talk about it online. Social media, has that been useful for you?
Social media has not been a sales tool for me at all. Social media is strictly where I show the work that I do, where I possibly am building my credentials, if you will. I'm showing people my knowledge, my skill set, perhaps my sense of humor, how I like to teach. So it's kind of a glimpse into what I do and what I offer. I don't currently directly sell on social media at all. And I've not had good success the few times I have tried it. So it remains just a platform for communication and sharing for me. The places where I sell, I think I'll do number one first. My number one promotional area is definitely YouTube. And I don't know that I would say this is true for everyone, but this is what works for me. I like talking, as you can see. I like showing and explaining. And so fairly early on, like in my 4 years ago when I was just starting the business, my husband had the bright idea of live streaming some of my quilting projects. So actual client projects, just get on air, get some decent camera views, couple different viewpoints, and show what I'm doing and talk about what I'm doing. So we have now dubbed it Quilting's first reality show because I'm not aware that anyone else is doing that on YouTube. Typically, you will see edited, cleaned up, pretty looking projects. And so I get out there and, I'm okay with being embarrassed sometimes when things go wrong, but I let it all show. So that has proven to be a great platform because it draws people in that have similar interests, that search for similar things that I do, and it provides great connection, loyalty. So the same people that find me and watch one or two of my episodes, typically the analytics show they come back over and over and over and over and watch hours and hours of my episodes. And that person then is the person who is much more interested when I do have something to sell. And when I do start sending out promotions in my newsletters, they're the person that says, oh yeah, I know you and I know your style of quilting and your style of teaching, and that suits me to a T. So YouTube has been a great platform for me. And I've kind of ramped that up my last couple of course launches. And what I mean by a launch is twice a year, I spend some focused time promoting and talking about a course, and I open the enrollment, and then I take that group of students through. So I do that twice a year. Leading up to that launch, I do a very concentrated, usually 30 days of going live on YouTube every single day. And what that does is just builds this, it's like a rolling snowball from day 1 to day 10 to day 20 to day 30. It's just this growth of viewership and people watching, so that near the end of it, when I start saying, oh, hey, I've got a course that's available, here's what it's all about, they're very, very interested. And there's a lot of people watching by that point. So that has served me really well several times over.
I want to point out for our audience how you chose a path that you like to communicate. So you're a talker, you're a teacher, so you showed up on video and you did what you did best, and you talk about what you're doing and your process, and you made it a natural part of your marketing. So I just want to point that out to our audience, like going where you show up the best as yourself, and using your own skill set can be part of your marketing.
Yeah, understanding the launch flow, and that you can't just talk about it for a few days and all of a sudden start selling. You really have to build up to it and have that be your primary intention over a longer period. So great example.
That really is a key point, Andi. The launch has several parts to it. And the first part is definitely that growth of awareness and visibility. And whether you choose Instagram or TikTok or YouTube, it doesn't matter to me, but in some way, ramp up, magnify your visibility before you get to the point of offering your workshop or wherever it is that you're going to start actually selling your product. You need eyes on it. You need eyeballs on it. And just talking about it 3 times on Instagram and then trying to sell it, you're apt to come up crickets at that point.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why everything is called a funnel, because you have to get all those big, lots of eyeballs on to trickle down into the actual student portion of it. But that's great that you've dialed in for success on that.
There's so many rabbit trails we could go down in this. Early on in my growth as a business, I picked a few mentors, not that I necessarily know personally, but it might have been a book author, a podcaster, people that did business in a way that I could relate to and aspire to, and basically role models for me. So I picked just a few people and concentrated on learning what I could from them. One of them said, you should give 10 times before you try and sell. And that's not a hard and fast number, but that principle I feel like applies. So my 30 days, for example, on YouTube, I'm giving information, knowledge, tips, skills, ideas away over and over and over and over. And this is critical in building the trust of these folks, so that when you do say, I've got something for sale, they're like, wow, she gives away all of this for free. What must her paid product be like? And I think that's really key. And it makes me feel good about it. And then I don't feel like a greasy salesperson when I get around to selling my thing, because it's a relationship that we've built.
Yeah, for sure.
So you've also mentioned that you started a podcast. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
It's been a little bit of an interesting story. Of course, many people have started a podcast because it's a great platform because you own it. So you get to talk about whatever you want to talk about, if indeed you've got offerings or topics or whatever it is. So I initially started my podcast. It must be close to 4 years ago, about the same time I was getting serious about my business. I was, had my finger in a lot of pies. And I think I did 89 or 90 episodes sequentially, one every week, hardly missed a week, maybe two in all that time. Great. Had great feedback and views, and that was all lovely. But there did eventually come a time when I just literally had my fingers in too many pies. I was like straddling several moving vehicles, right? And I just could not do all the things. And at the time, the podcast for me was not producing a specific return. I didn't have anyone sponsoring it necessarily, wasn't getting paid for it. And I decided that YouTube did a better job of creating visibility and promotion, which is what I was looking for. So podcast went on hiatus, and that lasted almost 2 years. And I've just recently started up again. And this time, and I think this idea came from you, Andi, when we met each other first in Utah. We were talking about podcasts, and I was saying, I want to resurrect mine, but I'm kind of scared of committing to it because, like, what if I get myself in that same hamster wheel again? And you said, what about you do seasons? So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm in the early stages of a 20 episode season, and then we'll take it from there. But that gives me the freedom, as you two do, it gives you the freedom to not have to produce all the year round, right? All the things all the time. And you get little breathers betwixt and
Yeah.
between. It's a good thing.
Yeah, I'm really excited to bring your podcast back. I was one of those first 90 episodes, and I really
You are.
enjoyed our interview. So I was listening quite a bit, and I'm excited that you're bringing it back. It was a great podcast. So listeners, if you're looking for a podcast, you should go check out Susan's because it's going to be really good.
Agreed. And here's another great benefit of doing seasons is you can pick kind of themes or related content that does not have to be identical to what you were doing before. Because I was kind of, everyone was an interview in my early iteration. That's fairly time consuming. You all will know that. So in this iteration, I'm leaning a little more toward business and entrepreneurial topics, and not all of them are interviews. And next season, it might be something else again. Do you two do that in yours too? Do you kind of flex what you're doing in the different seasons? You didn't expect me to ask the questions, did you?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No fair turning the tables.
I wish we could say we put a little more thought into it, but we have fun with it. We come up with topics that we're interested in the time and what's coming up with trends and things like that, conversations we see online that we want to bring to our audience. And then we also look at who's doing what. And sometimes we just get requests like Kay Collins, who will come out a few episodes before you, as she reached out and was like, hey, I would love to be on your podcast. We're like, oh yeah, we got room this season. Kay, come on over. And we kind of go from there.
That's a great time to point out to anyone and everyone that we're happy to book a time if you want to try being on a podcast. We love to talk to quilters and entrepreneurs in general. So this is definitely a side hustle for both Tori and I and everybody these days. Life just gets really hectic sometimes, and you have to put things on pause. And having that built-in structure of, we're only going to do this for a limited run, and then we'll come back to it. Like you said, that does give us some freedom. It does give us some flexibility to handle all the other things that we have going on. But I want to pivot a little bit and talk about one of your recent adventures, Susan, because you just came back from a cruise. And we have talked to some other quilters who taught on cruises, but I understand you put this one together all by yourself.
Well, not me personally by myself, but my husband, who I affectionately dub Mr. Producer, he and we had one administrative part-time helper. Her name was Caitlin. So between the three of us, we did. So we hosted a long arm quilting cruise. Well, really a machine quilting cruise. We did take 2 long arms on the boat. I taught some of the classes. Beth Ann Nemesh taught some, and my friend Sam Alberts taught some. So it was quite fun to put it together because as teachers, we talked. We planned this for like 15 months. So throughout that time, we were talking about what our class content would be. And I chose those 2 teachers because they have a different style from mine. So I said earlier, I'm kind of all about the couch quilts, the practical quilts, and practical tips and solutions, how to get a square and a flat quilt and how to deal with wavy borders and all those things. That's my specialty. Beth Ann is a true artist, but textiles are her medium. So her quilting has an artistic quality that is unparalleled in my experience in the quilting world right now. Sam Alberts is more contemporary in her quilting. So a lot of ruler work, a lot of geometric lines, and some really original quilting ideas. So it was fun to think through, how can we build this into a cohesive whole? How can we encourage our quilters, and we had 64 of them, by the way, to not take this class and take this class and take this class, but to come to everything and just absorb it all. And they pretty much did. And then the other kind of unique thing that we did is we floated, we called them business breakouts, because all three of us are quilting entrepreneurs. And I've not seen any quilting cruises that offer entrepreneurial type classes. Like, we had things about, how to plan and store your video library and social media content. Client communication. I did one on photographing your quilts. We had a videographer on board. He was recording the classes and taking tons and tons of snapshots and film of the whole thing. He talked about lighting, and he's worked in Hollywood, so he knows what he's talking about. So he came with some great tips for the quilters for, filtered light and diffused light and reflected light and all these things, and talked about that. So we did those at 7:30 in the morning, ladies, even on the in-port days. And out of our 64 people, we thought to ourselves, like, what will come? Maybe 6, 8, 10 people? Like, we had no idea. Instantly, 40 people showed up for every one of those 7:30 episodes. So it made us realize that there really is a hunger and a desire for that kind of knowledge. I mean, people were just drinking it in. So it was a really fun time. Like, we spent, all of us, a lot of time together in our conference room, and it was a really good time. I think for a first cruise, we have to mark that one success. We loved it.
That's great. How difficult was it to coordinate with the cruise line? My first question is where would you even start with that?
It wasn't bad. Funny story for you guys. When I first started thinking about this idea of putting a cruise together, I happened to be working with a business coach. And the 6 degrees of separation? She says to me, "Oh, I know somebody that does cruises. He was a high school buddy. Let me put you two in touch." So she got us on the phone with this gentleman. He does heavy metal tours, and he's been doing it for something like 14 years. He fills an entire ship, so 3,000 to 4,000 people, and he sells out in hours. So he knows how to put on a cruise, right? So he's this soft-spoken gentleman, and we get on the phone with him. And that was where we started. And we just fired questions at him, like, how do you liaison with the ship? Like, where do we start? So he actually gave us some names, some contact names with the different cruise lines. And that's where we began, by talking to them. In practice, the way it works is you essentially work through a travel agent, and they do the talking to the boat, the planning in advance, and they work up your package for your rooms and what your bonuses are going to be for every so many rooms you sell, and whether you get a conference room and whether you get an opening reception and those sorts of things included. So they work out all those details with the boat, and we don't deal with them directly until we actually get on the ship. And then when we were on the ship, they had a team of concierges. And so that was our contact point then for any questions we had or any adjustments we needed.
So fun. Thank you. Thank you for sharing the details. Yeah, it gets our mind spinning, doesn't it?
It does. I'm like, oh, how can we do one, Andi? Like, for
Right.
Audacious, maybe.
Yep. Audacious at Sea, coming soon.
It's so cool.
So what else do you have coming up, Susan, here for the rest of 2025? What are you looking forward to?
Well, I'm kind of on rinse and repeat in terms of my main course, which is, I would call it a signature course. It's pretty full-bodied. It's teaching a whole selection of free motion designs. And I think my specialty that I think is unique to me is that I not only teach these designs, which are my own, they're original to me, but I spend a fair bit of emphasis on teaching my thought process. So where I find ideas and how I go from idea to quilting design, and then how I work out the kinks when I'm not happy with that quilting design. What do I try? What do I change, etc. The idea being that students who go through my course can then find their own original ideas, and they know what to do with them and what are the important things to look for when you want to create a design. Like, it's easy to remember. It can't be so complicated that you get caught up and lost, right? Or it has a way to travel around the quilt, or it has some little motif that you can tuck into the odd corners. So there's this kind of checklist of things that make a good design. So all of that is taught in my main signature course, and I have launched it, I think, 11 times so far. So number 12 is coming up this spring, and I'll do it twice this year. So that's my large focus. Even though I've launched it 11 times, every time through, I'm improving. I like to think I'm improving. I'm reviewing and assessing, at least. It might be my email sequences. It might be what does my workshop look like where I'm giving people a teaser and introducing my course? So I'm always working on those things betwixt and between. Then my other large project is that I am developing another course. It is much smaller, it is much less expensive, but I get a lot of requests for my free motion course is just about designs. Coming into it, the assumption is you already know how to get your domestic machine ready, or you already know how to load your long arm. You know what batting you want. You know how to choose thread and deal with tension. You've got all that stuff. It's just about the quilting designs. So my new one is kind of a prequel, and I call it Machine Quilting for Beginners, everything you need to know to get started. So it does not teach very much quilting designs at all. It's the brass tacks. It's like, what are the ways that I could baste for my domestic machine? How do I load it a long arm? What are the steps for advancing the quilt and keeping it square? What are good marking tools to use? All those sorts of things. So it's really brass tacks. So that has been recorded. It is now being edited by someone other than me because that is not my skill set. And that will hopefully be coming out just a little later on this spring. Let's
Awesome.
see. The one other thing that I do have is a monthly subscription membership, which this was born from, again, I've got my major course. It's got my 27 designs in it, but I still have new ideas. And every so often I've got a new design developing. And what am I going to do? Keep growing that course forever? That's not practical, right? So this membership then came out of that. So every month I release a couple of lessons. It might be a new freehand edge to edge design. It might be a guest speaker or teacher teaching something quilting related. It might be a case study. So it might be an in-depth look at a project I worked on that had particular challenges or features and a walkthrough step by step. So every month I release 2 lessons. And so subscribers then, when they're a current subscriber, they have access to all the lessons that have ever been published. And there's, I don't know, getting close to 200 right now. And then of course, if you let your subscription lapse, then it all goes away. So it's that subscription membership model. And that's really all I have on my docket, if you will. That's
I
it.
love that. I love how
And it
simple
keeps
it
me
is.
running.
Yeah. And you have the main course that leads into a membership like that. And then it flows into the YouTube. Like I can see the flow and it feels very organic. It feels very doable, which I think, as you mentioned before, as creative entrepreneurs, we tend to have our finger in so many pies. And from the way you've structured yours, it sounds almost relaxing. But I
Oh
know it's not
gosh,
quite.
that's a bit of a stretch, but I'm happy to hear you say that because that's what I'm striving toward. One thing supports another, which feeds another, etc. It's not all crystal clear when you start. So if we're talking to some beginners here, and I'm sure we are, don't feel the pressure to try and figure that all out at the beginning. Start with something. And the ideas come when you're in motion. A YouTuber that I love always says you can't steer a parked car. And I love that analogy because it's like just get moving and then you might turn left and you might find, oh, I don't like doing that. So then you might pivot right, right? So these things have grown over the course of several years and I've let things go as I bring new things in and it is developing and I'm pleased about it.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, I think we've hit a natural transition point to get into our rapid fire questions. But folks, before we do that, before we hear Susan's answers to those questions, I have to remind you about EQA. If you have not invested in this software yet and you have aspirations of designing quilts, or you just need, to put your own things together, you want to check yardage, you want to get quilting faster, make these ideas come to life, you definitely want to purchase EQ8. And in addition to the software, you can continue learning about quilt design with a lot of their add-on products and their books that have wonderful guided tutorials. So explore and use our affiliate link in the show notes if you decide to purchase this software. Without any further ado, Susan, what color do you struggle to use in your projects?
Brown. Bet you've
I'm
never heard that
laughing because
before.
that has been probably our most common answer this season is everybody's struggling with brown.
Yeah. It's a toughie.
Do you prefer yardage or pre-cuts?
Definitely yardage. I tend to make scrappy quilts. And so I get yardage that speaks to me and then I cut it into increasingly smaller pieces until it's gone.
Love that. Somebody speaks to you.
And what is your favorite quilting notion?
Blue painter's tape. So this is as a long armor, right? It is by far the most used tool in my long arming area. I just use it for so many things.
Can you elaborate? What do you use it for?
Things like when I'm quilting a design that's laid out in rows, I will literally stretch a piece from one side to the other of my quilt because it's bright blue and it gives me that very visual guideline. Even use it for lines. Use it if there are seams that are coming open on a quilt and I can't sort of make them lay down flat while I quilt over them. And then, assume that the owner will come back and hand stitch it. I can pull that together, lay a piece of blue painter's tape over it, and literally quilt over it, and then peel it off like you would foundation paper. There's two.
That's a
Oh, and
great
also
tip.
when you're trimming minky backing, if you've basted around the perimeter of your quilt, lay that blue tape on the back over that basting seam and then cut through it with your rotary cutter or scissors, and it keeps all the fuzz under control. I mean, it's worth its weight in gold. You should buy shares in the 3M company.
Yeah, and send some donations Susan's way for all these tips. That's gold. Oh my goodness. What is the most rewarding part of your business?
I think it has to be the people that I've gotten the opportunity to meet. Remember my early years? I grew up in the middle of nowhere. I never attended a quilt show till I was in my late fees, like any quilt show of any size. There was nothing near me, never took a class. I didn't know that there were pattern designers like you ladies, like individuals, or that there were fabric lines which came out like clothing lines. I knew none of that about the industry. So now, traveling to teach and things like the cruise and doing the podcast and then attending quilt shows, I'm just making so many personal connections and I love it. I love our community and it's so fun to find my place in it.
Oh, that's wonderful.
How many quilts are in the room with you right now?
Actually, only one, the one that's right behind me. So this is not my quilting studio. This is my office. So I keep this one behind me. You can see it's I live in the inland Northwest. So it's kind of a mountainy pine tree sky scene. And it's a piece of art and a lovely backdrop for when I'm doing calls.
Yeah, I'm admiring it. We'll have to get a full picture of that so that we can put it on our website with your show notes. Gorgeous quilt. Everybody head over to YouTube so you can see Susan's work in person. We also like to ask all of our guests, where are you finding inspiration? It can be a person, it can be a place, place, or thing, wherever, and it could be in your life or in your quilting business.
I think when you were giving me sort of the heads up on these questions, I think it asked person. I do have a person in mind, so I think I'll go there. I met her this year at the same conference you and I were at, Andi, Vanessa Christensen. She is a remarkable fabric designer, an artist, and just a remarkable human being too. I so value people whose values show up in their business and in how they conduct their lives. And she has a lot of things going for her. She's concerned about health and she speaks into our quilting industry quite vocally. And I love that about, concern for your health and your posture and your strength. And, she's of a similar age to me. And as we get into our middle and later years, like this matters. And I really appreciate her viewpoints on a lot of things. So she's a role model.
I love her work. V & Co. lines of fabric I have long admired. Oh, that's great.
Where can people find you?
Very easy to find me online. I am Stitched by Susan everywhere. So it's my Instagram handle, my Facebook handle, my YouTube channel, etc. I encourage you, if you want to know about what I do check out my YouTube channel and watch for upcoming live episodes. They're usually scheduled a couple of days in advance, and even sign up for my newsletter so that you will get advance notification of what the project is that's coming up next. So you can do that easily from my website. You'll get that little pop-up welcoming you to join my newsletter.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Susan. Hope to run into you in person again soon.
Thanks so much for having me, ladies. It's been a pleasure.
Another fantastic episode. I mean, these quilters are just amazing. So, Tori, what do you think is the biggest takeaway from our discussion with Susan?
I really enjoyed our conversation with Susan. I loved hearing all about her business structure, I think is my biggest takeaway. And I pointed it out during the episode, but I want to reiterate, I love how she structured her marketing around the way she likes to communicate and how that feeds into her course, and her course feeds her membership. And it's very organic. It's very supportive of her ideal customer, but it matches what she wants to do and her own specialty. And again, way she likes to communicate. So the whole thing I feel is very it flows well and it structures well. And like I said, it almost, I know it's not, but it almost sounds relaxing because I know she does a lot on the back end too. But I think we can all kind of strive to reach that level of flow and predictability for our businesses. And I think that was my biggest takeaway. Andy, what was your biggest takeaway?
Oh my gosh, I think she has such a fascinating story of growing up in, just in almost like Little House on the Prairie in the wilderness by herself on I can just picture that house with the quilt frame and the treadle machine, and just amazing. And I think that pioneer spirit is serving her well, and it carries through to her business efforts. Just that idea of, we're out here on the frontier, we need to just dive in and get it done, and everybody pitch in. And I love how her husband is involved and they're able to do these things together and really make a fantastic life and fun quilting business together.
Well, thanks again for tuning in, listeners, to this wonderful episode with Stitched by Susan. But don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. And if you're interested in more great interviews, helpful resources, and behind the scenes content, you can join us on Patreon for less than my order at Starbucks, which is around like $7 now, which is insane. But our Patreon is only $5 for the lowest tier and $15 for the highest tier. And don't forget to do a little quilting
on the side. What a great discussion. If you enjoyed this episode of Quilting on the Side, please leave us a review on whichever platform you're listening. It can be iTunes, Spotify, or even our YouTube channel.
And hit the subscribe button so you don't miss our next chat. Until then, remember to have fun in your business and do a little quilting on the side.